what we can imagine is incredibly important. Every moment we create who we are, and we create our planet. Thank you, Jody. So our third presenter this evening is Mike Margolin, and the title of his project is Finding Home. Mike was born at 10:30 a.m. However, it did not predispose him to being a morning person. Since Moscow, Russia was already cold in November, Mike had the good foresight to be born prematurely in October, before the real frost could set in. However, his parents, ignoring his silent pleas for much needed comfort, wrapped him in fur and let the boy nap away on the balcony on the 13th floor of their one-bedroom home. This was because the young and naive couple had someone say, "It'll do your boy good." Since then, Mike loves summer. His parents wanted to pursue a better life, and Mike was interested in finding bubble gum that didn't lose its flavor so quickly. And so they moved to the United States in 1991. Mike went on to graduate with a degree in environmental geoscience, but he decided to enroll in BBSH to fulfill his longing for a better life. Now he hopes to start his own healing practice. He lives in a cottage in the horse country of Bedford, New York, with his girlfriend Jennifer, who is also a BBSH graduate, and their beloved dog, Marvy. Nice.
So this is kind of like, I'm like the 7th inning. So in baseball, I do a stretch. If anybody wants to do a stretch, that would help me. I don't know if it would help you, but welcome to get up and just do a quick stretch. Shake it off.
Butt hurts from sitting on it all day. You recording that?
Yes. Got you on there.
I only have 15 minutes, come on. Okay, so Finding Home. I was going to read, but I guess I'll give you a small intro as to why this project came about. I sat on Santa's lap here 2 years ago, and Santa said, "What is it that you want most? Go deep inside." And I said, I want a feeling of home. And I only realized that sitting here that I actually have found that. I'm finding it. It's a process. It has been a process, and it's been, in large part, it's been due because of this place, because of you. So, when you think of home, what does that feel like? Come up with your own definition just for yourself, and to prime the pump, I'll just give you a few questions. Is home found within the neighborhood where you grew up? Is it in your mom's cooking? Is it found in the multiplicity of your close relationships, your family and friends? Is it in your heritage, your traditions? Is it where you're from, or is it where you end up? Can it be both? And this is an essential question that we're going to be exploring in this talk. Now, the interesting thing is, I have to speak. The interesting thing is that the definition of home can become quite fluid when we move from one place to another. In one place, home is associated with your friends. In another place, it's maybe the city that you love living in. In yet another place, it's the creative outlets that connect you deeply to yourself. To me, it's found in the internal and the external environments that shape my self-identity. Home feels like an anchor to the comfort in my life. It's where my soul can relax, where I feel welcomed as I am, where I enjoy a sense of peace. safety, belonging, and some degree of predictability. So my follow-up question to you is, what would it feel like not to have a sense of home anymore? What might change within you if you had to let go of the places and the people that you were a part of, and vice versa? So the reason why I started to explore this topic, it felt to me like it's becoming more relevant, and here are some reasons why. Right now, according to Wikipedia, 200 million people in the world are immigrants, which is roughly 3% of the world's population. For this population, finding home is at the heart of their concern. Reason 2. We have distinct political entities merging into larger bodies. This happened with the European Union. There's been talk of the North American Union, maybe sometime down the road, as well as the South American Union. So with people having to shift towards a broader cultural identity, so for instance, you're a French citizen, and now you've become a citizen of the European Union as well. This frees you up to live and work in another country that prior to the forming of the Union was foreign, and now you can move and live there fairly easily to work, to make a living. So it's an appropriate time to learn how to make most of your life, or one's life, in what previously may have been considered a foreign culture. Also in 2000, Barbara channeled the following: in the next 1,000 years, boundaries between nations will dissolve. We will create nations of individuals in communion that do not necessarily live in a particular geographical region. Communications will be developed by understanding the commonalities between all human beings. We all have the same longings, we all have the same basic human needs. And appropriately, just a recent example, in internet, Facebook recently created a new kind of world map which was solely based on Facebook connections among people. So he redefined political geography. So it seems like we do all have a basic need to have a home. One of the populations, again, that acutely experiences home loss and homesickness is the immigrant community. Now, why would people choose to immigrate? There are both positive and negative reasons. The positive are economic opportunities or benefits, job-related relocation, pursuit of learning by experiencing a new culture and a new way of being, greater personal freedoms. Here's a quote from my father when he moved and I asked him about it. He said, "Immigration is a time of excitement, reinvention, and new beginnings. It's like getting to experience a second youth." Now, there are also negative reasons why people would move. Escaping mistreatment or unfavorable future events, like oppression, genocide, famine, widespread disease. Physical loss of home due to man-made or natural events. And so it's interesting that both groups are subject to psychopathologies, which could include anxiety, depression, loss of role and identity in a new country, gross stress, feelings of isolation, rejection, and falling victim to discrimination. When I was doing some reading for this project, I came across an article that was widely circulated. It was about a Croatian teenager, a young girl of 14 or 15, who committed suicide because she couldn't cope with bullying because she was foreign. So what does it feel like to relocate? I found a very good quote, I think. Here's what this woman said. "It was more than culture shock. It was a spiritual crisis. By that I mean at the deepest level of myself, a crisis of identity, of self, of meaning. It was the most serious thing I've had to overcome. Because in a way, I lost part of myself during that time of emotional struggle, and at the same time I grew into someone new." So, healing process. First, when a client would come to you, it's important to establish their goals and what it is that they want. And it's important to honor that. Typically, the clients would come presenting one of 3 coping mechanisms. The first coping mechanism is you move to a new country and you just stick to what you know. You essentially isolate yourself in the community that you're familiar with, and you shun the outside world, the new country, the new culture. The second way is exactly the opposite. You come to a new place, you shun everything that came before, you cut off your roots, and you take on the new identity. You reinvent yourself from the ground up. The third way is the healthier way, where you blend the 2 cultures and find a balance in a way that feels good for you, where you can go from one culture to the next fairly seamlessly. So the first 2, it seems like, are the child consciousness perspective And the last one is the adult ego perspective. And as a healer, if that is what your client wants, your job or your task will be then to help the client successfully blend the two cultures together. The healer would need to exhibit cultural competency. The deep contact with our clients creates a sense of intimacy, bonding, so boundaries are at the forefront. Different cultures have different relationships to boundaries, and they run their energies differently. So for the healer, the competency would involve three things. One is the awareness of your own cultural values and biases. Two is awareness of the client's worldview. And three are culturally appropriate healing strategies. Now, as far as Brennan healing science, I thought here are some things that would be good to do. Out of everything we have in our tool belt, I would just focus on the skills that would be most helpful in kickstarting the process. It'll be important for the client to process feelings of shock, numbness, loss, sadness, grief, anger, to name a few. The second thing is cords that come from the first chakra, from the root chakra, and also from the soles of the feet. The cord from the root chakra connects down into the earth center, and the cords from the root of the feet connect into the local geography. So it'll be important to support those and repeatedly reconnect those for the client. I do believe that the heart healings will also play the most essential roles. In large part, it's the state of the client's heart line that will determine their ability to create emotional connections with the people and with the land, the new land, the new culture. According to Light Emerging, the heart puts the client on their life path, which includes material possessions, jobs, living location, friends, and intimate relationships. Now, oftentimes there will be heart distortions that are inherited. They are passed down through the bloodlines. In 2004, Seeds of the Spirit, Barbara channeled this. It is an excerpt. Humanity in different areas of the earth holds different split intentions. There's a break in intentionality and a misunderstanding of that break. Usually it has turned into a belief system that is then handed down through generations. Now, for me personally, I can relate to that split of uprootedness and wandering because my ancestors, my Jewish ancestors, even though they've lived in different locations throughout the world for many years, or sometimes centuries, still have a longing for a sense of home. So moving on with another healing skill that would be very useful is a core star healing. It may give the client a sense of home beyond space and beyond time. The core star dimension would help illuminate to the client resiliency and a part of them that's immutable. When seen from the spiritual perspective that our divine root is in fact inside of us, the entire integration experience can then be integrated as a catalyst to create a deep understanding of who we really are as human beings. We're spiritual beings that have to turn inside to remember our true nature, find our true home, and recreate an inner sense of belonging. Now, going outside of the Brennan healing model, there's also the role of the physical land, the natural landscape, that's also important. This would further nourish the spiritual aspect of immigration. And so it may be necessary for the client to walk the land, to go into nature, to be with the trees, with the rivers of this new setting. It would be akin to partaking in a vision quest. Also, our connection with the land is rooted in genetic coding that links to our ancestors, from whom we draw much of our spiritual support. There are deeper parts within our psyche and our soul that seek to find our ancestral roots. So if at all possible, again, as part of healing, it may be important for the client then to go back to their place of origin, to consciously reconnect with those roots. Another thing that could be very useful to a client is being a good listener. And here's an example from an ESL class. Here's a quote. "We did not ask our ESL seniors to talk about their voyage to Canada. Yet for many, this was the point at which they needed to begin their story. The need to talk about the reasons for leaving the old country, the process of being accepted as an immigrant, the trip itself, and first impressions of Canada seemed to be the once upon a time beginning of many stories. This time of transition of leaving the old country and coming to the new country is transformative and needs to be understood and talked about as part of integration and adjustment. Now, what's also helpful for immigrants is to then become legally recognized within the new country, so whether they obtain citizenship or equal rights, whether they obtain legal status as a permanent alien. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah, okay, you got it. And the last two things quickly. The receiving community, if there's a healthy way to receive and integrate immigrants, the immigrant population, the receiving community would benefit. Transformational work of this nature, working with a healer, for instance, can definitely lead to richness inherent in our diversity, and in that way, holographically, impact the field of human relationships on the planet. And there's an example about one of the world's most dangerous gangs called MS-13. I watched a National Geographic documentary about them. They were founded and formed in Los Angeles they were formed by immigrants who weren't being integrated into the community. They weren't being received, so they banded together for a sense of belonging, protection, identity, and empowerment. But unfortunately, their banding proved to be very potent, but a misguided and a distorted manifestation. So I am curious as to what positive contributions could have potentially been brought forth instead, had the initial needs of these immigrants been met. So I'd like to close with a channeling from Hewen from 2002. The great longing is for a global family, a planetary people that maintains individuality, the uniqueness of cultures, and at the same time finds ways to heal and soften borders and boundaries. Okay. When we find the time, I have a minute. If by a show of hands, how many of you are immigrants? Keep your hand up. And then how many of you are children of immigrants? And keep your hand up. Children of immigrants. And then how many of you are grandchildren of immigrants? That's a lot of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.